Hello everyone, Corey Harback here, and welcome to episode 2 of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Drumminstray Superior. Today we're going to be talking about MIDI sequencing. Not just talking about it either, we're going to be doing it in 3 different ways in fact. For starters, a question that I get quite frequently is whether I prefer to use pre-programmed MIDI grooves or MIDI sequences, or whether I prefer to program or key in my own. I definitely prefer to key in my own, and I'll show you why. So first off, I've got Superior Drummer loaded up right here, and you'll notice that I'm not using the default kit, but this will all apply to the same drum kit regardless of what you're using. So first I will open the Grooves tab, and you'll see I put some gain reduction down here, so I've reduced the volume from 0 to -6. This is just because the more that I add to the drum kit, the more that it's going to be interfering with the master level, and it's going to probably start clipping at some point. I just want to avoid that, even if it doesn't. It's always better to have less volume and turn my speakers up than to have more volume and have, irreparable distortion. So I've chosen a groove here that's from the New York Avatar kit in the Superior libraries. It's in straight 4/4 at the Song 06 120 beats per minute, hats closed, variation 20. So you can see here that it has the kit pieces, crash, hi-hat, kick, snare, and toms, and we'll listen to what that sounds like. So it sounds really good, and I like it a lot. Now, if we import it to the project, because our project is by default in 120 beats per minute, you can see now, while I really like this groove, honestly, it's pre-programmed and anyone who uses it will be able to recognize it immediately, and there is no way that it'll be faster for me to edit this than to just program my own groove. If I start swapping pieces around here, it's just gonna get wild and take me like minutes and minutes more, and that's not what I'm about. I'm all about workflow. I like to, strictly do things that'll help me move quicker so that if I have some ideas, I can lay them down right off the bat. So that was one example. If I move on to the, let's say the Metal Foundry, Gene Hoglan, why not? Let's just listen to one of these. I'm opening it with the tempo of the MIDI file, not the project that I have open. I just picked one at random, and you can already tell it's pretty buck wild. Gene Hoglan is of course known for his insane leg and arm power. And I didn't know he was a left side kick pedaler. That's interesting to know. Anyway, let's start off with a MIDI groove that we can just sequence with our mouse. Just click in the beats and it'll all be over with. First, we'll do an intro fill. Let's say I want a kick here. You'll notice that as I do this, it's all defaulting to 100 velocity out of a possible 127. And that's simply how MIDI information works, like digital MIDI information. It's all 0 to 127, so technically 128 values. Don't ask me why, but that's how it works. So now I'll just let's say I want some toms here. Let's use that for now. Dun, dun, dun. Actually, you know what? Let's move this forward a bit. Let's delete that for now. As you can tell, I've already memorized most of the MIDI mapping, but in this video I'll also be going over how to map your own MIDI notes just to make things reachable for if you plan to key drum or if you just want to have things more well arranged for certain kit pieces. But that's going to be something that I go over after I'm done with each of these MIDI sequences. Now, I'll tell you what, I'm just going to add some depth to those by introducing some double hits, or some flams, I guess you could call them. And let's do a 30-second note. I don't really know what I'm doing there. I just, this is sort of all just improvisation, really. But even so, I feel like there's some fun we can have with it. Let's do some triplets here. So for now, we've just got, you know, the occasional triplet and the occasional 30-second note, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's very familiar. If you ever hear me messing around on drum samples, you'll hear a lot of this sort of style in terms of fills. That kind of thing. So that takes care of mousing notes in. Generally, you'll just want to go in, choose your draw tool, choose your mouse tool if you want to drag things around, and just generally just memorize the positioning of your MIDI notes. For the next one, this is going to be a fairly interesting experience for those of you that haven't heard of step sequencing, but step sequencing, this blue cursor will follow you around, and you will be playing it with a MIDI device, a MIDI controller. So for now, I start with my very first hit, and then I use the arrow keys to advance if I'm not already advancing at a quick enough rate. Alright, where am I here? Oops. Hit the wrong F key. And these two will still have to unsnap. I use the snap on off to reposition anything that's going to be out of time. So yeah, as you can tell, you can easily fix any velocity mistakes that you make. And that's the idea behind step sequencing, is if you want everything perfectly in time, or at least as close as you want it, it's a really good way to just punch in one note at a time or one beat at a time, anything like that. Now let's do this. Oops. Ooh, whoops. As you can tell, I very frequently just lose my train of thought when I'm playing around with step sequencing, and I just forget all about the blue cursor there. And let's compare that to the original. A little bit of humanization here and there, and I really dig that. I dig humanization when it can be provided. For the next one, we'll be key drumming this entirely. So let's disable step input and just punch in our hits. I suppose I'll start with the kick and snare, just to save myself some humiliation. Now, what you'll notice I did there is I just hit a certain key a couple times to align automatically to the nearest beat there. I'm pressing Q, and if you go into key commands, you'll notice that quantize is set to Q. So that's good to know. However, what I've also done is I've customized my quantization. If you look in the quantize panel here, so on left here you have expression map, note expression, chord editing, quantize, transpose, and length. Quantize will give you some really nice customization over how much you exactly quantize. So right now, if I was to press that, everything would line up to the nearest rhythm, or sorry, the next beat according to your quantize settings. but with no discrimination whatsoever. So no note is left out and no note is made an exception, and it's just completely linear. With iterative quantize, or iterative, I've never been sure how to pronounce it, quantize on, you can customize this so that it, with every time that you press the Q key, or every time that you decide to hit the quantize button, which is in edit quantize, it will just bring it just inch it closer to the nearest rhythm. So hopefully that makes sense. I've got the sensitivity set to 60, the iterative strength. So if I set my quantization settings to 16th triplets, you'll see that I got nowhere near close enough. Yeah, like if I press Q, that's just going to happen. That's a disaster. So we just bring it close like that. Now, with the rest of these, now let's record those toms again. That's pretty good. Let's copy those again. Unsnap here. And just within that, let's say that much, we'll bring the velocity down. And for the sake of having some humanized snare fill, "30" Sure, why not? If I wanted to, I can just drag one of these closer, and we can see that the other one's not perfectly aligned, but even so, it's quite close. Now let's do the cymbals. Now, I forgot to do the hi-hat. Let's just adjust these. Bit closer, but even so. Yeah, that I figure I might as well just start quantizing and dragging over. No problem there. So that would be let's check these velocities out, bring these up a little bit. I'm cheating, of course. Yeah, so let's listen to each of these in sequence. So as you can tell, it's one of those different strokes for different folks type deals, but it's always a good idea to, find your groove, pun intended, to be able to improve your workflow. So if you work best with a mouse all your notes in. If you work best in step sequencing, then step sequence all the time, or at least most of the time. And key drumming, same deal. Me, I use a combination of all three. Generally, I start with the key drumming, then I move into step sequencing, then I move into the mousing in. Some of my scratch drum tracks, I'll start with the step sequencing drums. However, it's not a permanent thing for me. Now, I didn't show off, but I have set up my entire kit here. I won't bother going through all my different symbols here, but I will go briefly over the idea of mapping your own MIDI keys. So let's say, actually let's take me for example. This is definitely something that I do every time I set up a new drum kit preset. So the D key, this D2, I generally don't use the choke symbol or the mute symbol that comes preloaded there. So what I'm going to do is I'm instead going to throw a snare drum sample there. And you'll notice what I did there was I right-clicked on the snare drum. It shows me a list of all of the articulations that are included. And then I can just select which one I want, hold it, and drag it onto the key that I want. I'm not going to join that because I don't want the cymbal mute and the snare drum edge to be playing at the same time. I'm just going to replace that entirely. And now, if I play a fill here, then it's much more efficient for me as a key drummer. But you'll notice that I don't have a whole lot of power in my pansy little fingers. I definitely left my piano fingers at the office. So let's look at the velocity control here. I call this a velocity curve, and basically it's just that. It's just a chart that says I'm playing with this, like my performance provides this input. So my velocity is between this and this, and if it falls between these certain lines, then it will instead play this velocity. The output velocity here is indicative of that. So let's say the lower we go, the stronger the increase in signal. So now, if I reset this, 100, actually, I guess it's more apparent if I play it. Let's go with this. Yeah, so as you can tell, it's very useful for if you're a weak hitter like myself. I have a preset loaded up here called parabolic, and it's only slightly different from what I changed it to there. And I use this for all of my drums. Only the actual drum pieces though, the kick, snare, and toms. So let's change everything to that. So you can select more with Shift and just right click. So now let's listen to what that sounds like. It's much harder hitting, that's for sure. Now on the same token, we can map triggered drums, or X drums in the case of Superior Drummer, to those MIDI keys that we're assigning. And that's a very useful tip as well. So let's say I really want to get some punch out of my kick drum. I set up a new X drum right there. I choose which kit it's coming from. Let's just say Rock Warehouse for the sake of simplicity. Just came to mind right here. we will choose the instrument that we're using. It's a kick. And it just shows up with a massive kick drum right there. Let's use the generic picture so it doesn't get in our way. And we'll choose the microphone assignment. So this is going to assign it to either a microphone that we already have within the Metal Machinery kit, or if we reset it and we can just have it exclusively towards certain kicks, or sorry, certain mics. But I don't want it to be played on the same microphone channel as my existing kick drum, because that way I wouldn't be able to have individual control over the volume or the filtering. If I want compression just on this and not on the original, then I wouldn't be able to do that. So I'm going to drag that KD, and I'm going to drag it on top of this new button, and now we have its own channel. And if I go over here in the mixer, you can see X1-KD. Now the useful part about this is that if I go into mapping now, and I have this selected, I can merge this, or join it rather, with each and every one of these. So now, as you can tell, it's already having an impact on the transient effect, the attack of the kick drum. And we can do the same thing with the snare. So let's make an X drum for the snare from let's just use the avatar kit. Let's reset everything here again. And yeah, let's just use the top mic. Shouldn't be a problem there. And join every articulation with its corresponding key. Terrific. So as you can see, it's very, very useful for those kinds of situations. Now, other than that, there are plenty of other things that I can go over, but I think I'll save those for another video. Those other things that I can go over would include things like effects and drum tuning, the usefulness of drum tuning in Superior Drummer, but I feel like I've gone over enough for this video, especially considering I've already hit all the major points that have to do with programming or sequencing your own drum loop. I really hope that helped, but definitely expect more useful info in the next few videos. Until then, I will see you again.